Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Dr. David, it was a widely held prediction that once we reopened, we would see a spike across states. What is the data telling you now that we're actually doing it?
Right. Thanks for having me. What we should be looking at is hospitalizations. Cases are going to go up because we're testing more. So as we test more, we're going to find more cases. But hospitalizations are a more objective measure of what the national trend is. And in fact, we're seeing hospitalizations go up. So we saw steady declines nationally in hospitalizations, both when you look at the tri-state region and even when you exclude the tri-state region, we saw sustained declines in new hospitalizations over a period of 2 weeks. And then over the last week, we saw hospitalizations start to go up. So you look at states like Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Maryland, Virginia, Minnesota, Wisconsin. We've seen hospitalizations go up in all those states, Arkansas and Mississippi as well. And so that's concerning. We expected that as we reopen, there'd be a slight bump up. So we just need to watch this very closely. This is why a lot of states prescribed a very staged reopening so that they can reopen parts of their economy, pause, look at the data to make sure there wasn't a big spike in cases, and then reopen other parts of their economy.
Is there a specific number or a range in terms of that number going up that for you would warrant states to reconsider reopening, change course?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I mean, it depends on the state. It's going to depend on what the baseline is, what the capacity of the state is, how much infection they had to start with. You know, so a big increase in a state that wasn't heavily impacted might be less worrisome because it might be, symbolic of a single outbreak versus a state where you had pervasive infection. You never really got rid of the transmission. Now you're seeing a big uptick, like a state like Maryland or Virginia, which were heavily hit. And now we're seeing upticks in their hospitalizations and new cases. And so it really depends on the state that you're talking about. Minnesota, for example, North Dakota, they saw increases, but they were increases off a lower baseline, and they were the result of isolated outbreaks that should be containable if they get the proper resources into those regions.
I understand why investors in big pharma care about every possible headline around a vaccine. But is the general public getting too wrapped up in the hopes for a vaccine in the immediate future? Is it distracting from the need for all of us to practice basic safety and understand what it's like to live with this?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a good question whether or not consumers are looking towards a vaccine and think it's going to be right around the corner and they're letting their guard down. I don't think so. I don't get that sense. I think most people recognize that a vaccine probably isn't right around the corner. I think the data that we've seen, and it's early data, and in a normal circumstance, companies wouldn't be putting out, for example, animal data the way that they are. But I think the data that we've seen gives us renewed confidence that we'll get a vaccine for COVID. That's really what the scientific information is telling us. But I think it's really a 2021 event that we're going to have a vaccine available for widespread use by the general public. We might have something available in the fall that we would use in a limited circumstance under an emergency use authorization by the Food and Drug Administration. But in terms of mass inoculation, it's really a 2021 event. And I think we're going to need to get through one more cycle with this virus in the fall and contend with probably a second wave in the fall and the winter before we can get to a vaccine. And so we really need to start preparing for that and try to put in place the tools that we're going to need, the screening, the case-based interventions, the ability to track and trace in the fall to prevent outbreaks in states and cities from becoming another national epidemic.
Do you think we're doing that? I mean, we are seeing it happen in specific states, but we seem to be the only developed country that doesn't have a national game plan for this.
I think what we lack is a national plan with respect to screening and the reporting of data. I think what we need to do is have a much more comprehensive approach to try to get testing into the community and into at-risk environments. So we're testing not just people who are symptomatic, who feel like they have the flu and go to the doctor because they're worried they might have COVID, but people who are either mildly symptomatic or even asymptomatic, but working and living in high-risk situations where they might be exposed to the virus. We really need to make testing more pervasive and start turning over those cases, because it's not just symptomatic individuals that are spreading this virus. In fact, the data shows you can be just as contagious if you're mildly symptomatic or even asymptomatic. And so we need to start identifying those individuals as well. And that's going to take a very coordinated strategy to get testing into at-risk work sites, people who work in jobs where they can't social distance, where they're in contact with a lot of people. And that's what we're seeing in these meatpacking situations, in these warehouses, also certain housing situations, people who live in more crowded housing circumstances where they can't social distance at home. Those are higher risk settings. People who work in jobs where they come into contact with a lot of consumers, people who have to take mass transit to work. All of those individuals are at higher risk of the infection. We need to make sure we're bringing testing into the communities where you have individuals who are at highest risk.
What's your level of confidence that any of that is going to happen?
It's happening on a state-by-state basis. I think it's not happening uniformly across the country, and there's some states that are doing a better job than others. I'm close to the governors of Maryland and Massachusetts, been working on them as part of their advisory boards. I know those states are focused on this. My home state of Connecticut, I've talked to Governor Lamont. I know he's very focused on this. They actually have a plan for bringing testing into certain job sites, into certain housing environments. It's not happening nationally. There's states that aren't as focused on these challenges, and this is where we need to go if we want to prevent outbreaks in the fall from becoming, large outbreaks or an epidemic. We have the capacity to do that now. We shouldn't get caught off guard by this second wave. It's very likely to come in the fall. We can mitigate it, but we need to start planning now.
Even if we do get a vaccine, do you believe enough people will take it to make a big difference?
I do. If you look at, if you think about how many people need to take it, you probably need to get to probably 40% of people taking the vaccine. If you look at vaccination rates, about 30% take the shingles vaccine. About 45% of people seek the flu vaccine. The reason we don't need to get to 60, 70% coverage with a vaccine for COVID is that by the time we have a vaccine, probably 15, 20% of the population will have already had coronavirus, and that's optimistic. I mean, if we continue on the slow burn that we're on now in terms of the infection rate right now, we're turning over about 20,000 cases a day, which is possible that we're going to continue from here till September at this sort of slow burn of infection. By September, 15% of the population will have had COVID-19. And so when you think about a vaccine being available in the sort of early part of 2021, and that I think is an optimistic scenario, but achievable, by that point, at least 20% of the population will have had it. So if you can vaccinate another 30, 40% of the population on top of that, that gets you to herd immunity.
I want to ask you about guidance. We did get the CDC's guidance last week, but it was cumbersome and confusing, and in many instances, it's exhausting people. Do you think the American people have gotten clear messaging around the basics to protect themselves?
Well, there's two different messages. One is the clear messaging to consumers about what they can do and sort of practical advice to individuals on how to lower their risk in their daily lives. And I think that we've done a good job of providing that. Practice good hygiene, try to social distance, wear masks, narrow down your social circles, limit your activity where you can. All the things you could do in your daily lives is sort of common sense things to try to reduce your risk of exposure, your risk of contracting this. Then there's technical guidance to businesses that CDC really needs to issue. How do schools reopen? How do restaurants reopen? How do you set up a restaurant? How do you practice good hygiene for food handlers? How do you open up hospitality venues? That guidance needs to be very technical, very specific. The more specific it is, I think it's actually more beneficial to businesses. And, the documents that CDC put out were really intended for businesses and people who could digest those more technical documents. You look at like McDonald's, they put out an 80-page guidance to their own franchises, and the airlines have extensive guidance documents for people who work within the airlines. I think businesses really need to be very granular with what they're going to do with respect to those procedures. That needs to come from CDC. Frankly, it came late. I think the more that CDC puts out bottom line practical guidance that's very detailed to businesses, the more it's going to facilitate reopening, because businesses, some of them are going to wait and look to the CDC, and in the absence of CDC issuing these guidelines, they're going to have to develop them on their own. It's going to take far longer for them to do this on their own.
It is Thursday, the 28th of May of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, is the sous chef today. He's groaning right now, as he normally does this time of the morning, but he'll be picking up the slack later. Hey, it's Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, folks. That's right, a little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. So, looks like Trump's going after Twitter, gonna close him down because he was fact-checked. Fact-checked for 2 tweets out of 52,000 or more. And he's got to nationalize it, take him down because they're violating his free speech. What an idiot. He sounds like a Russian acid who doesn't know diddly about America. Fancy that. Or, more appropriately, fancy bear that. Yeah, they're active again. Who are they? The Russian troll bots and their, fellow travelers from other countries? I don't know. They may not be in consort with each other, but they all have similar goals in mind. Apparently, democracy is a threat to everything and everyone. Why? Because when the people vote, they usually want to get along with each other. And the powers that be are only in power because they're at odds? Is that how one achieves power, is to be at odds? I guess if you were not at odds and you achieved a certain, shall we say, respect, maybe you wouldn't be calling it power. Or, I always love the term power sharing. Well, how is that power? It sounds to me like it's still power. And people are going to wield it like a bludgeon or a cudgel. You bludgeon with a cudgel. You don't cudgel with a bludgeon. Okay, let's get that one straight. Who do you think we are? Deplorables? Yeah, they would never even come up with bludgeon. Yeah, it's sad. Obama's still getting blamed for everything. It looks like Bill Barr is digging deep to go after Obama for unmasking. And you know what Barr's going to be doing? Yeah, he'll be unmasking a lot of our Russian undercover agents, and maybe from other countries too, working undercover because, well, that's what happens when you get into power and you want to knock America down a few notches, because all those brown, black people and their white fellow travelers have somehow made this country a cesspool. God, the only cesspool is the swamp that a Bill Barr and a Donald Trump slosh around in. Yes, Gunner's snoring away. Can you hear? I'm sorry, but I can't. I for some reason, I'm a softie. I can't demand that he get out of here. Please. What do you think? Who do you think I am? Somebody with power? No, I'm a sharer. Power sharer. Oh, God, there's so much more news. We're going to get into the weather, but our infection rates here in Jackson County, it stood at 47. We went up to a high of 47 from the beginning of the lockdown to about 2 weeks ago. Well, actually, 2 weeks ago was when people decided, Kate Brown, our Democratic governor, she's a woman, she's a socialist, she's a commie, she's a jackboot, trying to keep us safe. Yeah, your jackboot's trying to keep you safe. So people said, we're just going to ignore all of this pandemic protocols. The president of the United States says it's a hoax. He's not wearing a mask. I mean, he's making jokes about it, essentially telling us to drink bleach. Who would do that? Well, people did. I keep getting taken to task because I make the joke about, well, Trump told us to drink bleach and inject Lysol. And they go, you heard something completely different from what I heard. And I go, have you guys ever heard of a rhetorical flourish? And they don't even know what rhetorical is. And flourish, they think, is like a pair of shoes. Yeah, you're going to have to dig deep to get that one, kids. I think you have to be of a certain age to make the association of flourish and Florsheim. But, or mass use of illicit substances might allow you to make that association. But nonetheless, what have we been flourishing here in Jackson County? Another spike of infections. 2 weeks after everybody decided, hey, Kate Brown, Jack Boot, Commie, we'll show you. But it's worse in California. Their 2 weeks are up, and oh my God. So at the top, Dr. Gottlieb was speaking of a second wave. We haven't even gotten through the first wave. We got a second wave coming up in a few months. And we are wholly unprepared. Well, we, the little people with the pitchforks, we know what to do, and we've been doing it. In spite of our terrible neighbors who surround us who just don't care about another person. I don't want to hear another repug talk to me about the good neighbor policy. They don't believe in a good neighbor policy. They want to take guns into a state house and force a governor to do their will. Scream and spit at cops. White supremacists. As long as you're a white supremacist, you can scream and spit at cops while heavily armed in a state house and threatening the governor with death, and nothing will happen to you. Now juxtapose that with Black Lives Matter activists. Now I know it's a riot now, but you know how that riot started? 5 sat down in the middle of an intersection that had no traffic, held up signs protesting the murder of Mr. Floyd, and they were hit with tear gas and beanbags from roofs. All lives matter, except some lives matter more than most. And obviously white lives matter more than black lives matter, and they're never going to let you forget it, ever. So I want to put a lie that Trump is the first to investigate this. He's calling for an expedited investigation. He's the first. That's a bitter pill for you Democrats to have to swallow. Excuse me. He went golfing. He hasn't said diddly about this until, 8 hours ago. And that was after an internal investigation from the police department, expedited, by the way. And they fired those cops after the mayor called for a murder charge to be leveled against the cop that placed his knee on Mr. Floyd's neck and suffocated him to death. And then also after Trump went and played golf again. Then he calls for an expedited investigation. Somebody told him, hey, you better jump on this. I mean, this is big. Look at the riots. We can use this and tell everybody that you proposed peace. And all that Joe Biden did was hide behind his mask. I could see it coming. In fact, it's already here. So what's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, by the way. Oh, yeah. Trump bragged about lowering drug costs after vowing to veto the bill that would lower drug costs. He just does not know how to govern. I keep saying it as a joke, but I don't know if it's a joke. I'm pretty sure he did take that FSB crash course in American civics for assets, dupes, and useful idiots. I'm sure of it. It's only the abridged part. They don't get real nuance. Unable to get money back from big coal operator Hallador Energy and EVO Transportation, Trump is going after Planned Parenthood to return its Paycheck pandemic loans. And Bill Barr is making sure his investigation into the Russia investigation carries political consequences for anyone caught protecting America from a hostile foreign power. Because they're not hostile to him. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where EU governments moved to ban Trump's malaria drug for COVID-19 as a second global trial was halted over growing safety fears. And Venezuela has reached a deal with the UN to buy food and medicine with gold held in Bank of England accounts. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. And Kelly has been locked down in a domicile other than a regular domicile because people keep dying in her old domicile from the pandemic coronavirus COVID-19. So thank you, Kelly, for living in dangerous times and loving too. Hey, and thank you for all that you do here at the station. If you would then take a gander from the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com to the leftish of the page, you will then notice our Patreon link. And I know it's perilous times and money is tight, but our bills keep going up. I know yours do as well. If you're able to afford the cost of an espresso-type coffee drink, that's a good sum of money to send our way once a month, because we're able to stretch that even further because we're quantum mechanics on the, subatomic level at stretching dollars. And it's mostly dollars. We don't do the exchange so much between foreign currencies. But anyway, thank you for being so generous. For those of you who have, we've been doing this for almost 10 years now. 24/7, 365 Resistance Radio. I've even had a shoulder surgery. I had cellulitis and got put in ICU, and we kept broadcasting because we are dedicated to our civic duty of resisting as the founders originally intended. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that and so much more. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam because I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, a very integral part to this multimedia operation. Look at it as not just the overhead projector. Remember those? Oh, you don't even know what it is? It is, or was, an integral part of our educational experience. Anyway, no, it's the actual articles from what I've riffed on so that you will actually know what the true news is, rather than just my comical take. Yeah. Thank you, Gunner. We can hear you now. I love him so much. I can't kick him out. I'm sorry. I tried, but he didn't want to. He wants to lay on my feet and snore. And let's see. Oh, follow on the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Oh, I meant to say that from the Daily Co's diary, I post the show notes and links diary on social media like Twitter and Facebook too. Though I don't know. I have some ambivalence about those two platforms. You know, Trump wants to take him down. I don't know if he can. But, I don't know. He is the most powerful man in the world right now, as crazy as that sounds. So let's jump into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe. It comes out of the American Independent by Dan Desai Martin. And Trump's like bragging about lowering drug costs. I love this because he announced a new Medicare prescription drug plan that would cap insulin costs at $35 per month, adding that he hopes seniors are going to remember it in November. Like, do people really remember the $1,200 that he handed out? Like that was going to help? Yeah, that went far. Huh? Yeah, they'll remember it in November. I thought buying off people was supposed to be illegal in our political structure. Apparently not when you're run by mobsters and it's being turned over into a mob government. Being truthful and following the law makes you the crook. Now, the White House noted that 3 million seniors on Medicare take insulin, and a top healthcare official said seniors would save about 66% on insulin with the new plan. You know, Nancy had proffered all sorts of these plans, and they just sat in Moscow Mitch's graveyard until they withered and died in the graveyard of democracy that Mitch McConnell is the grim reaper of. Self-proclaimed, by the way. I'm not making this up. He proclaims himself to be as such. While seniors may see the cost of one prescription drug come down, Trump has threatened to veto H.R. 3, the Elijah E. Cummings Lower Drug Costs Now Act, which would do the same for all Americans. Well, I wonder, is there a color associated with what this bill is, who this bill is named after? Is there a color associated? Could it be black, and that's why he's going to veto it? At really the heart of the issue? Because Trump's heart is so dark and so evil and so petty. Singer, also of the American Independent, brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. The Trump administration is trying to claw back some of the $80 million in coronavirus relief received by Planned Parenthood affiliates across the country as part of a program to offset financial losses due to the COVID-19 pandemic. A number of affiliates received letters from the Small Business Administration claiming that it had found groups ineligible for loans from the Paycheck Protection Program created by Congress to help businesses stay afloat, pay their employees when they are closed under coronavirus stay-at-home orders. Now, the move is the latest attempt by the Trump administration to defund Planned Parenthood. And they've been doing this for quite a few years, and it's even been happening before Trump took office. Weird, isn't it? Now, of course, we know that Planned Parenthood offers a wide range of health care services for women and men across the country. Conservatives have long targeted the organization for performing abortions and providing abortion referrals. And I should add, they've even gone back to whining about birth control, just like they did when Roe v. Wade was argued before the Warren Court. Weird. The Trump administration and other Republican lawmakers are taking advantage of the pandemic in working to eliminate abortion access. GOP governors have tried to use fear of the virus to ban abortion services, and Republican lawmakers are trying to strip abortion coverage from some stopgap private health care plans Americans can purchase when they lose their employer-sponsored coverage. Planned Parenthood affiliates across the country are facing the same financial strain as other small businesses, with stay-at-home orders forcing the cancellation of some in-person health services and making fundraising difficult. To offset the lost revenue, Planned Parenthood affiliates applied for and received loans under the Paycheck Protection Program. Organizations with more than 500 employees, such as Planned Parenthood, are not eligible to receive the loans under the program. However, the Planned Parenthood affiliates that applied for the loans operate independently with far fewer employees. So let's remind ourselves that, they could not wrest money back from big coal operator Hallador, who received tens of millions of dollars. And they got a lot more than 500 employees, I got to tell you. Oh, and who else did they not get money back from? EVO Transportation, one of the largest transport companies in the country, competes on the world level. They don't have affiliates, They do have satellite offices, but not getting money back from them. But if you're trying to kill two birds with one stone, what better time to do that than during a pandemic? Tucker and Michael Balsamo of the Associated Press bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. So-called Attorney General William Barr says he doesn't expect a criminal inquiry into the origins of the Russia investigation to target former President Barack Obama or Joe Biden, the former vice president, and Trump's Democratic opponent. Oh, no. He doesn't expect it. No, but it's going to happen anyway, right? We all know that. But that doesn't mean the investigation led by U.S. Attorney Suck-Up John Durham of Connecticut. Yeah, you know this guy. Well, it doesn't carry its own political consequences. The inquiry could conclude this summer, meaning fresh revelations might be exploited by Trump in the heat of the election season to damage Biden or to attack the Obama administration. I just want to know who's going to present the blue dress first. I wonder. Buoyed by the Justice Department's decision to dismiss the case against former National Security Advisor and still admitted traitor Michael Flynn, and by the ongoing declassification of Russia-related material, has it really? I think it's been cherry-picked, and we know it has. Trump and his allies have looked to Durham's investigation as the last opportunity to hold accountable officials they say wronged Donald Trump. Former Obama administration officials, meanwhile, find themselves scrutinized for actions they took 4 years ago while investigating Russian election interference. A look at where things stand. Well, what exactly is the investigation about? Well, let's find out what the AP says. Durham is a federal prosecutor with decades of Justice Department experience. He's investigated FBI corruption related to the handling of Boston mobster Whitey Bulger, and later the CIA's harsh overseas interrogations of terror suspects. He was named last year by Barr to investigate the origins of the Russia investigation. Durham's investigation is one of multiple inquiries the department has undertaken in connection with the FBI's probe into coordination between Russia and the 2016 Trump campaign. Those include an internal review of the Justice Department's handling of the Flynn investigation and an Inspector General report that was issued last December. Unlike those inquiries, which were focused on Justice Department employees, Durham's mandate is much broader, spanning the activities of the CIA and other agencies across government. Do you think Durham is going to uncover the Russian moles that have been helping Trump achieve his ends? Let's not forget, Sally Yates was fired mere days after she approached the White House and said, "You have a Russian spy in your midst, and he's also working for Turkey on the sly." And they fired her. And then they fired every single FBI agent that had anything to do with Russia experience and specialty. Not just those investigating Trump for his coordinated conspiracy with Vlad, but anybody had anything to do with Russia generally. And it did not stop there. Do you think Durham is going to uncover that? Is he going to call back the IGs that uncovered that? No. This is what Vlad did when he rose to power. Exactly what Vlad did when he rose to power. Can we stop ignoring that? It's not just the rantings of some guy in a private park setting here in Rogue River, Oregon, though beautiful it may be. Let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. Warmer oceans are putting stress on corals and causing many of them to turn white or bleach. But some corals under stress are instead becoming strangely colorful, turning brilliant neon pink, yellow, purple, or blue.
They give this very vibrant coloration which really blows you away.
Jörg Wiedemann heads the University of Southampton's Coral Reef Laboratory in the UK. He said he was seeing photos and reports of these brightly colored corals, but no one knew what was happening. So his lab experimentally bleached corals to find out. First, though, it's important to understand that corals aren't really a single organism. They're a symbiotic duo, a partnership between an algae and a coral.
So it's two completely different organisms working together to create something which they couldn't achieve by themselves.
The algae live inside the coral where they get shelter and nutrients, and the corals reap the benefits of photosynthesis. But when the scientists exposed corals to warmer water, they watched as the coral's symbiotic partners, the algae, slowly abandoned the coral skeleton. Usually, that's what results in bleaching. But in some cases, without the photosynthetic algae there to absorb incoming light, more of the light was bouncing around inside the coral's tissue, and the researchers observed the corals producing neon pigments in response. The pigments seemed to be a natural sunscreen, and those colorful areas appeared to attract the algae back.
The pink-colored areas, they repopulated faster with symbionts, and also the symbiont algae had a higher photosynthetic efficiency, which could be taken as an indicator of better health.
The results are in the journal Current Biology. Wiedemann says the flashy neon colors only appear with mild levels of stress, too hot, and the corals can't cope. But if you do happen to see corals flashing neon colors, it's a good sign they're fighting back, and fighting to be noticed by their algae partners. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Colorectal cancer is the number 2 cancer killer of men and women in the United States, but it is preventable. Early on, Colorectal cancer typically has no symptoms. It starts with a precancerous polyp or abnormal growth in the colon, which can be removed without surgery. Several tests are available to find these polyps, so they can be removed before they turn into cancer. Screening also finds colorectal cancer early when treatment works best. Recommended screening for adults at average risk begins at age 50 and continues until age 75. Learn about screening test options and find out which tests are covered by insurance. Talk to your healthcare provider about when you should be screened and discuss the best tests for you. For more information about colorectal cancer prevention, please visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO. This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
For an expectant mother, taking care of her developing baby means taking good care of herself. One way she can do this is by ensuring she gets vaccinated. If a woman is or might be pregnant during flu season, it's especially important to get her annual flu shot, preferably before the end of October. In addition, women should be vaccinated against whooping cough during the third trimester of each pregnancy. Failure to get vaccinated places both mother and baby at increased risk for serious complications of these infections, including hospitalization and even death. If you're pregnant or planning to get pregnant, ask your healthcare provider when you should get your vaccines. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. It doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1882. That was the day that John Muir, a Scottish-American conservationist, founded the Sierra Club in San Francisco, California. The Sierra Club's purpose was to explore, enjoy, and protect the wild places of the earth. Today, the organization has more than 1 million members and is one of the most well-known environmental organizations on the planet. The labor movement and the environmental movements in the United States have not always had an easy relationship. Too often, politicians and the media have framed policy decisions as a choice between good jobs and a clean environment. But during the 1990s, some environmentalists and unionists began to break down this divide. Both groups opposed the North American Free Trade Agreement, arguing it would have a negative impact on both jobs and the environment. During the massive protests of the World Trade Organization in 1999 in Seattle, labor protested alongside environmental activists. One memorable tagline to come out of the protest was, "Turtles love Teamsters, Teamsters love turtles." Then, in 2006, the Sierra Club partnered with the United Steelworkers to launch the Blue-Green Alliance. The effort joins together blue-collar workers with green environmental justice groups. The partnership seeks to supply policy and education about sustainable job growth in fields such as clean energy. Multiple environmental groups and unions, including the American Federation of Teachers, the Communication Workers of America, the Service Employees International Union, and the United Auto Workers, have signed on to the effort. But it's not always easy to keep the two causes united. In 2012, the Laborers Union left the alliance due to disagreements over the Keystone XL pipeline. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
More than 100,000 Americans have now died of COVID-19 in less than 4 months. That's almost twice the number of Americans lost during the entire Vietnam War. Even then, the numbers probably don't paint a complete picture of the damage, since many victims, like those who died in their homes and not in a hospital, might never have been tested for the virus, and states still don't agree on how to report deaths. While Americans are absorbing the steep toll of the crisis, infectious disease experts say it's almost certain we'll see a second surge of the virus in the fall. A protest outside a Minneapolis police station turned violent for a second straight night on Wednesday as crowds demanded justice for George Floyd. He's the black man who died after a white police officer kneeled on his neck during his arrest. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey called for calm and backed demands for prosecutors to file charges against the officer, asking why is the man who killed George Floyd not in jail? The officer and 3 others involved in Floyd's arrest on suspicion of forgery were fired on Tuesday after a video recorded by a bystander was posted online showing Floyd lying face down in the street as the officer kneels on his neck, even after Floyd gasps for air and says, "I can't breathe." Another protest in Los Angeles shut down and blocked both sides of the always busy 101 freeway. Donald Trump tweeted a lie. All right, that's not news. He does that multiple times every day. But this time, Twitter attached fact-checking notices to 2 of his egregious tweets, causing the president to go ballistic and threaten to, quote, strongly regulate or close them down because we can never, ever allow this to happen. Trump is expected to sign an executive order Thursday that the New York Times says is intended to curtail the legal protections that shield social media companies from liability for what gets posted on their platforms. The Washington Post says the order, quote, could roll back the immunity that tech giants have for the content on their sites. So I guess that would mean now Twitter is not responsible for Trump's constant lies he tweets on their platform. Without these protections, they would be liable, making it more likely they would try to remove his lying tweets. Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg went on Fox So-Called News on Wednesday and told Dana Perino that he disagrees with Twitter fact-checking Trump, saying, quote, we have a different policy, I think, than Twitter on this. You know, I just believe strongly that Facebook shouldn't be the arbiter of truth of everything that people say online. I think in general, private companies probably shouldn't be, or especially these platform companies shouldn't be in the position of doing that. Huh? Well, Twitter's Jack Dorsey responded, quote, we'll continue to point out incorrect or disputed information about elections globally, and we will admit to and own any mistakes we make. This does not make us an arbiter of truth. Our intention is to connect the dots of conflicting statements and show the information in dispute so people can judge for themselves. More transparency from us is critical so folks can clearly see the why behind our actions. Stay tuned. The House on Wednesday scrapped a vote on a bill seeking to extend the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, or FISA, surveillance options that the FBI considers crucial in the fight against terrorism. House Democrats pulled the legislation after Trump threatened to quickly veto it. Trump said the massive abuse of the FISA court was a big part of a, quote, attempted coup against his administration in the early days of the Russia investigation. What? Trump's opposition then prompted House Republicans to withdraw their support. We should note at this time that the FISA provision has been routinely reapproved on an almost unanimous basis since it's been in existence. But the 70 or so members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus also came out against the legislation, saying it lacked reforms demanded by privacy advocates. China's parliament approved a decision to go forward with national security legislation for Hong Kong that democracy activists fear could jeopardize its special autonomy and freedoms. China says the legislation will be aimed at tackling secession, subversion, terrorism, and foreign interference. But the plan unveiled in Beijing last week triggered the first big protests in Hong Kong for months. Riot police were out in force in Hong Kong as its legislators debated another piece of legislation, a bill that would criminalize disrespect of China's national anthem. Oy. While the U.S. piled on pressure aimed at preserving the city's autonomy. The launch of a SpaceX rocket ship with 2 NASA astronauts on board for a history-making flight into orbit was scrapped with 16 minutes to go in the countdown on Wednesday because of the danger of lightning. Liftoff is rescheduled for Saturday. The launch will usher in a new era of commercial spaceflight and puts NASA back in the business of launching astronauts from U.S. soil for the first time in over 9 years.
I got good news.
And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com. Please click on that donate button.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 64 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of about 92 to 95, and overnight lows. Oh my God, I should look at the overnight lows because, well, they're not so bad. About 62. So a good deal of sunshine today. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Continuing tonight at that same clip, but shifting ever so slightly out of the north-northwest. And then intervals of cloud tomorrow with a high of about 93 to 97. And lots of sunshine, though, in between those intervals of clouds. Winds will be out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then we're looking at about an inch and a quarter to an inch and a half of rain just on Saturday. We call that a gully washer. Or, well, at least I do. As alluded to earlier in the show, confirmed cases here in Jackson County, Oregon, which is in the southern part of Oregon, have now risen from 60 to 65 overnight. Is it because we're testing more? No. 2 weeks ago, a bunch of yahoos decided, you know what? We hate Kate Brown. She's a Democrat. She's a liberal. And this whole thing's a hoax. What do I hear now that it's spiked to now 65? Hey, we all have to go sometime. They're in a death cult. They are truly in a death cult. Barometric pressure is, grass pollen is very high. Air quality index is supposedly once again in the good range at 41 parts per million, which was similar to yesterday, but that daytime UV index remains very high. Click down to 8, but that's still very high. SP 30 and above, folks. Barometric pressure is rising at 29.95 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles and relative humidity is at 61%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world because that's how the weather underground works. Data sets from folks like you and me. Indeed. London is 69 degrees and sunny with coronavirus. Paris is, so lovely at 77 degrees, but with coronavirus, I don't know. Rome is 75 and partly cloudy. It's lovely in Rome this time of year when it's partly cloudy, except for coronavirus. Kyiv is 55 and light rain. I know little about Kyiv, though other members of my family are well acquainted with the whole of Ukraine. But they're not going there because of coronavirus. Hong Kong is 77 and partly cloudy. I'm not getting a suit there for a long time, not just because of coronavirus. Tokyo is 66 and mostly cloudy with coronavirus. I want my Ankimo, even though we have coronavirus. Sydney, Australia is 57 degrees and fair. Shrimp on the Barbie in your backyard because of coronavirus. San Francisco, California is 52 degrees and mostly cloudy with coronavirus. And New York is 71 degrees Fahrenheit, cloudy, with the continuous drone of sirens and backhoes digging mass graves because of coronavirus. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. And these people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Matthias Lamont, Alistair Smout, and Emilio Parodi of Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. European governments moved yesterday, Wednesday, to halt the use of anti-malaria drug hydroxychloroquine to treat COVID-19 patients, and a second global trial was suspended. Further blows to hopes for a treatment promoted by Donald Trump. The moves by France, Italy, and Belgium followed a World Health Organization decision on Monday to pause a large trial of the malaria drug due to safety concerns. A UK regulator said that a separate trial was also being put on hold less than a week after it started. The study, being led by the University of Oxford and partly funded by Bill and Melinda Gates' foundation, was expected to involve as many as 40,000 healthcare workers. All hydroxychloroquine trials in COVID-19 remain under close review while investigators assess any further risks, the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency said in an email to Reuters. The swift moves by authorities in countries hit hardest by the pandemic highlighted the challenge for governments scrambling to find ways to treat patients and control the novel coronavirus.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Daisy Betrago of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Venezuela has reached a deal with the UN Development Program to destine part of its gold and Bank of England accounts toward the purchase of food and medicine during the coronavirus pandemic, its central bank governor said yesterday, Wednesday. The deal comes after Venezuela's central bank made a legal claim earlier this month to try to force the Bank of England to hand over part of the 31 tons of gold in accounts belonging to the government of President Nicolas Maduro, whom Britain does not recognize as Venezuela's legitimate leader due to allegations he rigged his 2018 re-election. Let that be a lesson to you, Danny. Central Bank Governor Calixto Ortega told Reuters that under the arrangement, the UNDP would receive the funds directly, a move meant to assuage concerns about potential corruption. Indeed. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, and you know Netroots Radio will broadcast on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.